Happiness as a habit. How small daily actions shape well-being. My argument is that happiness is not random. It can be built through small daily behaviors. This topic matters for many reasons. In Western culture and humanity, there is a common belief that happiness comes from major life events like getting married, getting a big job or pay raise, or having a child, along with many other reasons. Imagine that you're a big athlete playing in a big game and you do something or you achieve something so big and so large like a championship that the happiness that you build from that is adopted by the players, your family, your fans, your teammates, your coaches that are around you. And that adoption of happiness can really make it seem like this is going to be long term. However, research and reading show that daily habits shape well-being more, like journaling, drinking enough water, and getting adequate sleep. I wanted to include this quote here to the left that states from the Dalai Lama the ninth that just one small positive thought in the morning can change your whole day. While doing readings and research earlier from the semester, I stumbled upon this quote and it really spoke to me so much that I started practicing this myself by telling myself every morning that I am worthy, I am capable, and I'm strong. And I would repeat those three phrases to myself every morning. And although it felt redundant at first, I actually over time I started to see improvements in my day-to-day life. So for my scientific journal, I chose The How of Happiness, a scientific approach to getting the life you want, written in 2007 by Sonia Lyubomirsky. And some overview and main themes of the book are that happiness is a skill, not an accident, and that through intentional activities like gratitude, kindness, exercise, and optimism is actually scientifically proven to raise your well-being. And I was hesitant at first because I feel like a lot of people, along with myself, see happiness as something that is spontaneous and coincidental, but there's evidence in experiments that prove these activities work long term. The idea of neuroplasticity was also mentioned a lot, which is repeated positive actions actually change the brain. And an idea that I'm going to talk about later that backs this is habit stacking. And then lastly, your life circumstances matter less than daily behavior. And I want to touch on this briefly because this relates to the athlete analogy I used in that so many big things, positive and negative, happen in one's life that it can really, in hindsight, it seems to really affect your motivation and happiness more than your small routines, but this proves otherwise. So this is special to my overarching argument for many reasons. The how of happiness is important because it provides scientific proof that happiness is created through intentional behaviors, like we mentioned. The author uses controlled studies, data, and psychological research to show that activities like gratitude, kindness, exercise, and social connection produce measurable increases in well-being. This supports the argument that happiness is a skill and can be practiced and developed through daily habits. And some of those daily habits we're going to talk about in my popular book. Some of the key points I wanted to point out from the reading are that 40% of our happiness comes from intentional actions, which I found crazy because I had always thought it was primarily genetic. And I think it was about 20 or 25% genetic. But the fact that 40% of our happiness comes from actions that are intentional drastically disproves the fact that it's unintentional or by accident. There's research showing that gratitude, optimism, and kindness raise long-term satisfaction. And then the idea of neuroplasticity was brought up a lot, which is the idea that repeating positive activities strengthens the brain. There was also data proving that small routines like exercise, journalism, and mindfulness reduce stress and increase resilience. I thought this was really impressive in relation to my argument. Um, the book does not rely on opinion. Every claim is linked to experiments and data. The author studied thousands of participants and tracked long-term psychological outcomes. This makes the argument strong and trustworthy. And while the other book talks about how to build habits, this one proves those habits actually work. Together, they turn into a motivational idea into a scientifically grounded argument. So Professor Lubermisky is a professor of psychology at UCal Riverside and one of the leading researchers in positive psychology. She spent decades studying happiness, emotion, gratitude, and well-being. And one thing I found really special is that she conducts all experiments herself, and they're all based on real data rather than a second or self-help opinion. Her expertise makes the book credible, academic, and reliable. All right, so for my popular book, I talked about Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. This was written by James Clear in 2018. Some of the main themes I wanted to touch on are that small habits create big results over time. And this was backed by the research in my scientific book. Another key theme was to focus on systems and routines rather than motivation or willpower. The author also talked about identity-based change, which is the idea that you become what you repeatedly do. Also, he argued that environment and routine shape behavior more than willpower, and that progress increases confidence, control, and happiness. So, Atomic Habits is valuable because it proves that major life changes in happiness don't require huge events, just small, consistent behaviors. Clear shows that even tiny habits done daily can create long-term improvements in mood, confidence, motivation, and well-being. This perfectly supports the argument that happiness is something we build through our actions, not something that randomly happens to us. One idea he touched on a lot is the idea of 1% daily improvements, which is small progress every day compounds into major results. And I had actually, prior to reading this, I had practiced that myself through the Dalai Lama quote around the same time, just little things like doing something compassionate for yourself or others and something very minuscule you don't think about. Actually, I would also saw improvements in major results and achievements in my life. He also talked about the idea of identity-based habits, which is the idea that happiness grows when our actions match the type of person we want to be. And the habit loop, which is here to the left, is the loop of cue, craving, response, and reward. So, and then he also talked about environment design, which is shaping our surroundings, makes good habits easier than bad ones. One idea that really spoke with me with James is just the idea of identity-based habits and the 1% improvements I think are very intertwined. Um, I've always tried, not always, I'm sorry, but I've tried recently to integrate those ideas with each other by being compassionate for myself and changing daily routines. And I've actually seen drastic results in my consistent long-term happiness and well-being. So pictured here to the left is James Clear. He's a habits researcher, speaker, and writer who focuses on behavior science and performance psychology. His expertise comes from studying athletes, coaches, neuroscientists, and psychologists, then translating that research into everyday language. His skill is communication as he takes academic ideas and shows real-world examples of how habits affect happiness, success, mental health, and personal growth. I thought it was really impressive how he takes complicated psychology and makes it practical and usable. He doesn't just say good habits make life better. He explains how happiness improves when we create routines, control our environments, and build confidence through small wins. Rather than motivation or willpower, the book gives systems that lead to long-term well-being. This makes the argument believable and realistic, in which I've seen in my own practice. So the shared message and shared theme is that good, consistent habits equal longer, enduring happiness, which can be really hard for someone to grasp because there's such a misconception and misbelief that it is due to major life events. But the research and the habits and routines show that happiness comes from small, repeated daily actions like journaling, exercise, drinking enough water, or getting enough sleep. Big life changes don't matter as much as consistent habits, and progress, not perfection, drives long-term well-being. So, how they fit together, Atomic Habits teaches how to build habits, and then the how of happiness proves why those habits increase happiness. So I wanted to include here some examples of small habits. And here to the left, I have this diagram of certain healthy habits one could use daily. And I touched on most of them, but just eating healthy food, journaling, fresh air and sunshine, hydrating, exercise, meditation, and listening to a good tune or some of your favorite music are just little routines and little things you can do daily that will increase your neuroplasticity and your long-term well-being, which this is also consistent with the idea of the 1% daily improvement from Clear, just that doing one small thing every day over time will prove that the concepts that we learned from the scientific journal actually work. Another one I wanted to discuss was gratitude journaling or kindness, which is from a scientific article. I've also practiced journaling recently, which also felt redundant at first, but actually writing down how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it has helped me be more grateful and have gratitude and compassion towards myself and towards others. I think daily movement and exercise is also important for me. Um, the Professor Lubermisky actually proved that in one of her studies that daily exercise releases endorphins, which is consistent over time. Cleaning or organizing small spaces can really help you clear cleaning your space clears your mind. And it's that simple. And being somewhere that's organized and that you're comfortable in will provoke better well-being. And then same with the idea of progress, not perfection, of setting short, realistic goals rather than ones that you may not be able to achieve. Um, Also, I wanted to just touch on the idea of habit stacking, which is linking a new habit to an existing one, making it easier to adopt and maintain new behaviors. So, an example of this would be, say, I wake up every morning and I make my coffee. Well, after my coffee, if I add the habit of listening to my favorite song or doing something like journaling for a minute, and then listening to my favorite song, vice versa, repeating those habits in the same order over time are scientifically proven to help your well-being as well. But overall, the idea that happiness is a habit, it really speaks to me and should speak to you just because it's something that it's easy to give up on easy. It's easy to give up on quickly, but through the research and through my readings, which I recommend to everyone, it shows that these healthy habits can produce more well-being. In conclusion, atomic habits and the how of happiness show that happiness is something we create through small, consistent behaviors. Tiny habits seem simple, but they slowly build confidence, structure, and emotional well-being. Clear explains how these habits take root, while Lubermisky proves that they scientifically increase happiness. In the end, happiness doesn't come from luck or major life changes. It grows from the choices we repeat every day.